Okay, welcome music fans to the next installment here. I'm going to touch on some things that are a bit of a step away from the series that I have been doing on Blues 101. Basically, I have done part 1 and 2 to give a lot of basics on blues and blues music, but a question came up in a blues guitar forum that I want to address today, specifically on bar chords and bar chords alternatives. But before I do that, I want to wish everybody a happy St. Paddy's Day. I am recording this on St. Paddy's Day. I have no idea when you are watching this, but I want to honor a great Irish guitar player, Mr. Rory Gallagher. Rory set the tone for so much of what came out of Britain as far as British blues. Unheralded, I think, not really as well known as, say, Eric Clapton or Peter Green or any of the other people that did definitely set some standards as well, but Rory definitely set standards. If you don't know who Rory Gallagher is, you need to check him out. He grew up in County Donegal in Ireland, spent a lot of his early part of his career in Cork playing in bars there. He is a monster guitar player. Sadly, we lost him quite a few years ago at a much too young age. But he did a lot of great stuff, and so his live performances in particular are amazing, and check him out. One other quick story about Rory Gallagher is that Rory met a young man who was hungry about learning how to play and was enthralled with Rory's guitar tone. And this young man came up and asked him for information on how Rory was getting this sound at one of Rory's shows, and Rory showed him everything, how he was using an AC30 with a treble booster to get that sound, and of course this incredible Stratocaster that he was playing at the time that had this great sound. That young man took that information, and that young man's name was Brian May, who you may know from the band Queen. And Brian, of course, went on to create his own sound, but really built his sound out of the very foundation that Rory was using at the time. But Rory has had a lot of impact on a lot of people in the British blues scene and beyond, and he is somebody you definitely want to check out if you don't know who he is. But also today, more specifically, I am going to touch on a question that came up in a blues guitar forum regarding bar chords and alternatives to bar chords. And I really want to dive into this and cover this from a couple of different vantage points. What are better ways to play chords that have most of the sounds of a bar chord to eliminate some of that mud that is there that is inherent in a stacked triad chord, which is basically what a bar chord is, and I'll explain what that is as well. All kinds of other alternatives at your disposal. A lot of great players, including Jimi Hendrix, and a lot of current players are using these alternatives to make the playing cleaner, to emphasize certain notes in a chord, and they are a little bit different, but are definitely better alternatives to the standard bar chord that we all know and maybe love, and certainly have their application at certain times, just not all the time. And especially if you are playing in a band, they are not the best choices. And I'm going to explain why and dive into all of that right now. Okay, so what are alternatives to bar chords, and why would I be concerned about that? First off, just to describe what a bar chord actually is, it is really a series of stacked notes, really three notes from a scale that are used in a chord, and they are your root, your first note in the scale, your fifth note in the scale, and then your major third, right? In this case, our major third is C sharp. Okay, those notes. Okay. Now, the reason why that is maybe I say problematic at times, is that it is duplication of notes that are not necessary, duplication of sound that is not necessary. And in band situations, what you are doing is you are trying to find a place in the sonic space to fit in. And as a guitar player, that is hard. And it's hard primarily because in a band, especially if it's a bigger band, and I have played in bands with horn sections and keyboard players and all of that, and what you end up having to do is to find chord voicings that are different that allow you to stand out and for you to actually be heard. When you are playing just only stacked triad chords like this in a bar chord, what you're essentially doing is you're adding a lot of mud, or at least it turns out to be a lot of mud. And I really try to avoid that. So what are the alternatives? Well, alternative number one is to drop some of those notes out, which becomes hard if you're barring across the entire guitar like this. And certainly you can play a couple of notes in that, but for me, what I prefer to do is to have some degree of choice over the notes that actually are there. So I can create different sounds by doing that. All right, so what I would do then is I would come around here, and instead of barring across the whole guitar this way, I'm going to come up and use, it's this, a lot of guitar players. One of my favorite guitar players, a guy named David Grissom, does this. Jimi Hendrix certainly did this, where instead of playing the full bar chord, you're going to use your thumb to play that low root. In this case, I'm on the 5th fret. I'm playing in the key of A. And I'm going to come across the top here, and I'm going to use my thumb to fret that A note on the 5th fret low E string. There's some people that say it sounds different, and I think it does too. So the other thing that I'm going to do is, instead of playing, so we have, here's some other parts of the chord, I'm also going to lay that thumb across this D string here, A string, and I'm going to not play, I'm thinking about the D note here, I'm not playing that, or I'm not playing this E note up here, which would be the 5th in that chord. Here, I'm not going to play anything on the A string at all. I'm just going to lay my thumb across there and sort of mute that out. Something that's a skill, being able to mute out certain strings with fingers is a skill that you will need to know as a guitar player, because it will really help you to do some other things that make your chords sound real cool. There are some notes that just aren't necessary. In this case, it's redundant. I don't need to play that. What I am going to do is I'm going to play this note up here, this E. Again, there's another E note that gives me that 5th sound right here, and I'm going to play this note here, which is another A, and that is all I'm going to play. And in fact, I'm even laying my 3rd finger a little bit across this string here, this G string. So the only sounds, I'm really getting just 3 notes out of this. All right, so here's the full bar. Here's that partial chord with everything sort of muted out. Now I can add this note in here, which is a C sharp. That's my major 3rd. Again, it's not necessary. One of the beautiful things about not adding that note in there is I can sort of hover in this middle range between major and minor. I don't have a major 3rd. I don't have a minor 3rd in there. There's a minor bar chord. So it's kind of in that middle between there. So depending on what you're playing, you can eliminate that note and eliminate some other mud. All right. But it also frees up my little finger to add that sound in there. And I can add this major 3rd in if it's something that I really need to have in the chord. So again, I'm not going to be sort of muting that out with one of my fingers, my 3rd finger in this case, laying across it. Now I get more of a sound of a full bar chord. that low here, that low A, but I can also add in the suspended fourth sound, and now I've got a little bit more color to the chord. Okay, so you have all that. So that gives you some stuff. But let's say I'm playing in a blues band and I want the sound of this flatted seventh chord, this dominant seventh chord, in that chord. And I don't want to play a full bar chord. Well, I'm going to actually go into a whole section here in a moment on alternatives, different kinds of chords that you can play in different parts of the guitar to give you that sound. And I will cover that then. But right now, let's just say that I am the sole guitar player in this band and I still want to have that low A string sound. I can use pretty much the same idea. I am just going to bar across here these four strings, the top four strings, and add in this major seventh sound, or this major third sound. I've got a flatted seventh sound in that, which is here. I've got the major seventh sound. Okay, I've got all those sounds that are there. And I'm just going to lay this finger across here, my thumb. So now I have a little bit of a less muddy sounding chord that has most of the same notes as this big bar chord here. It's just is eliminating some of the mud potential here. Right? So that sounds like that. And I can still add in a fourth sound, which is something that you probably have heard in many, many different situations. And I'm going to actually come back to this and cover this in a slightly different way in the next section here too. But just thought I would add those things in. Those are alternatives that will make you stand out as a guitar player, that will make you sound better as a guitar player. And in the next section, we're going to dive into some things that will really separate you from the pack. If you can play some of these chords and some of these chord voicings and know how they work, you will become a good rhythm player, and every band needs a good rhythm player. All right, so I want to dive now into alternatives entirely for bar chords. Chords that you could use, especially if you're playing in a blues band, to add that flatted seventh sound and to do it on different parts of the guitar. But these are chords that actually work much, much better in a band situation, just because you're not playing all six strings on a guitar. You're playing in some cases the top four strings or the bottom four strings. And so I'm going to give you lots of different options here and try to describe exactly how this works. The first chord shape I'm going to teach that would be alternative to playing this bar chord, okay, would be a flatted seventh chord that begins here. I'm at the fifth fret again, so I've got my second finger on the fifth fret, E string. First finger playing the major third, which would be that C sharp, which would be fourth fret on the A string. And then I'm adding in the flatted seventh, which in this case would be my third finger on the D string. And then up here on the G string, I'm adding in this note, which is the G string on the sixth fret. And the overall chord sounds like this. And this chord comes out of the Western swing tradition. It's something that you would hear if you were listening to a band like Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys, where everything is down here. The guitar player is covering that part of the guitar on only those four strings. So that would have that kind of a sound. So that's a really great alternative. And there's another way that you can play it, just simply dropping out. Again, I do this a lot where I'm playing chords that are just parts of chords. They're double stops or just three notes. In this case, I'm going to play that same chord, and I'm just going to drop the major third out down here. I'm not going to play this 4th fret A string. I'm going to play it like this. And I use that chord a lot because as a slide player, a lot of times when I play slide in standard tuning, I have my slide here on my 4th finger. And I still want to be able to comp and play chords. So I'm going to play that as my A7 chord. I'm just dropping out that one note here. So that's a great alternative. Now I've also already described one alternative to a flatted 7th chord up an octave. And that is this one of barring those top 4 strings with my 1st finger and adding the major third in here, this C sharp here. And this is cool because now I can also play a really cool little rhythm figure and a little lick actually up here as part of that, just simply by barring across those 4 strings. So now it's minor. I'm going to add the major sound in, but I'm going to hammer that on. And then I'm adding on the sound of that suspended 4th or that 4th major note in the scale. So there you go. That is one alternative. So I've got that. And I can switch things around, add in a 9th. A 9th would be my 2nd up an octave, the 2nd note in the scale, in the A scale in this case, up an octave. So that would be a B, and I'm playing it here. And so it is at the 5th fret, I've got that G string, B string, E string, and then I'm adding in that B or that 9 down here in the 4th fret, which would be on the G string. All right, hopefully it makes sense, but that's a nice chord, and it is a substitute for the flatted 7th, and it is one that I use a lot. Now here's another way you can use this. Okay, so I use that as an alternative here very often, where I am moving from this note here, which is the flatted 7th. It's the G note played here on the D string. Okay, I am dropping that down a half step. It's got a real sort of soul sound to it. I really like doing that. There are times, though, that I even play it like this, where I may only be playing that flatted 7th and my root note up here on the 5th fret on the high E string, and laying my finger across and blocking out everything else in between. And that's another way to do it. So that is an alternative to those standard bar chords. There are lots of other alternatives, though. I can move some of those chords up an octave, so that so instead of playing that flatted 7th here, I'm going to move up here. So this is up here, starting with my 1st finger on the G string here. Up in the 7th fret. And really what I'm doing is I'm playing, so this is something that if you know the cage system, a really good way to understand exactly what I'm doing is to play the A chord up here, which is, so I'm up here at the 9th fret, playing like a D chord up here on the 9th fret, and then flip it around so that so I've lowered this note here, and that note is my root note. In that, again, that would be that same note here. All right, and I'm going to lower it a whole step. So this is on the B string again. I'm lowering this a whole step. So now it is a G, and that G is, again, a whole step down from the root is my flatted 7th. Now, so I'm going to play it just a little different. I'm going to, instead of playing it this way here, like this way, we would typically play the standard D cowboy chord down here. Okay, I'm going to flip it around, so I'm going to play it with my 2nd, 3rd, and 4th fingers here. And then I've got this 1st finger here to come down. I can also move from there into a 9th chord by switching around and playing it like this. So I've still got that same chord that I just had before. All right, I'm just adding in a note down below. And then I've got another alternative up a little bit higher on the guitar yet, which again I'm going to bar with my, up here at the 12th fret, I'm going to bar with my 3rd finger and add in this note here on the 11th fret, on the D string. So it sounds like that. That is a 9th chord, again up an octave, right? And I can even take it up higher yet. And again, like I would be playing an A down here, an A, just standard A cowboy chord, but with my finger, instead of playing it like this or like this, I'm playing it here like with my 1st finger. I'm going to move it all the way up here. So I'm up an octave entirely. All right, and I'm going to add my flatted 7th up here on top. Again, that note is G. And again, I am at the 14th fret here with my 1st finger. G added in here at the 15th fret. And so that is another A flatted 7th or A dominant chord. And then I can do something else really cool here because I have an extra finger here, and I can reach up 2 octaves or 2 frets above this and find that A a whole octave up. So I have that sound. So those are all alternatives. Those are ways that you can really take this in an entirely different direction. Last section here, I'm going to add some other voicings to this. And these are just some alternatives if you want to try some other voicings here. Okay, last section here just on voicings. I've got, remember that I played this chord down here. This was our dominant 7 chord. All right. And I'm going to turn it around. Remember I said that this was another way to play that chord, and that the reason why I did it is it freed up my finger here because I'm a slide player. Now, I can add another note up on top, which in this case is a 13, or the 6th note in the scale up an octave, so that it sounds like this. And I have this really cool jazzy sound here that I use in blues all the time as a substitution for my A7 chord. That is super cool. And I can go up and play it in a different part up here. I'm not going to mess around with that particular voicing, but so I'm going to give this to you as an alternative, a little bit of homework to figure out what that chord is up here. I will hint that I'm playing using my 2nd finger to play right here, to play the root note. And that root note is A because I'm in the key of A. Okay, so I create that chord, add that chord on top. And also, I like the 9th chord sound as a substitution. So here's another way to play a 9 chord. And in this case, this happens an awful lot and opens up a whole set of possibilities of things that you can do. I'm going to drop that root out, so I'm not going to play that root down here. Instead, I'm going to use that to cover that 9th note in here. And I have something here that I'm going to talk about in a second. These notes here at the 5th fret, so this would be B string and D string. Okay, and then in between, I'm going to catch that 9th here at the 4th fret and add the major 3rd, or the C sharp, which is 4th fret, on the A string, and it's going to sound like this. And that chord voicing actually comes from jazz organ players like Jimmy Smith and people like that use that kind of a sound to really kind of fill the sound out, but it doesn't have that root on the bottom like we expect it to. It is this form that's also movable. So it inverts every 4th fret. Inverts every 4th fret. All right, so we have that sound. Now here's the cool thing, is that I can use my middle finger here to sort of hybrid pick, using my pick and my middle finger. And I can play that chord, and I slide those 2 notes up. So that gives you some really cool things, and you've probably heard that in many blues songs. Right, so you're just moving those chords up, those notes up, and really playing a double stop. And I am only playing just those 2 strings, just the B string and the D string. All right, so now that should give you a lot of options. You've got chords of all kinds as substitutes. Just to simplify things, you have a lot of other chord voicings to play with. In subsequent videos, and in fact, actually in my last video on the Blues 101 Part 2, I did actually use all of those chords. All right, even moving at this. So you can play around with that, come up with your own sounds, and using chords as substitutions for the main 3 chords in a standard blues. And I will cover more of that in upcoming videos. Stick around. Thanks, everybody. I hope this has been helpful. I've given you a lot of stuff in a pretty short period of time. But remember to subscribe below, check out our website, and look for upcoming videos that will add some of these other aspects into this. And there's a lot more to do, a lot more to talk about, much more coming up. See you soon.